Well, with me in studio today is one of my best friends in the whole world. I'm so excited about this episode, talking to my good buddy, Pastor Roscoe Lilly from Starpoint Church in Albany, New York. Roscoe, so good to see you.
So good to be here. Honored to be on this podcast with you. Jarrett, you've been such a good friend for such a long time, and I hope all your listeners understand just what an authentic person you are, that you've been a pastor to so many other pastors around the country who just considered you a friend, and of course, I consider you one of my best friends.
Oh, man, I love you. When did we first meet, Roscoe? Jog my memory. 2000, it's like 14 or something?
I think 2011, we were taking a doctorate class together at Liberty.
And what was it, evangelism class?
Yeah, I think it was evangelism or church planting. That's right. And everybody in the room just wanted to, there's all this buzz that was going on. It was true story. I think your listeners would love to know this. We were in this class, and we had just received an award as a church for like church plant of the year or something like that. And the professor was giving me a hard time, like, Roscoe, when are you going to start another church? But there was this guy sitting in the back of the room, and everybody was buzzing about who is this guy. And they said, his name's Jarrett Stevens. Like, who is Jarrett Stevens? I've never heard of Jarrett Stevens before. And they're like, Prestonwood. You ever heard of Prestonwood? I'm like, no, I've never heard of Prestonwood. They're like, Jack Graham? I'm like, I don't know. So the professor's asking me this question. He's like, when are you going to start another church? I was like, well, whenever Jarrett Stevens pays for it. And the whole class just starts laughing. And then afterwards, I meet you. I'm like, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm just trying to take the heat off me. I'm sorry for throwing you under the bus. And you're like, no, I thought it was funny. I thought it was great. And you invite me out to Prestonwood, and then we're on that interstate. An intern comes pick me up, and then Jarrett Stevens is on a billboard. And I'm like, for I Am Second, I'm like, who is my friend Jarrett Stevens? And you have just been such a faithful friend, and like who you are is, off the stage is just who you are, the same person on stage as you are off the stage. And I'm just so honored to call you my friend.
Well, you inspire me, man. It's one of the reasons I'm so excited to have you on the podcast today. And we deal with all types of subjects and talk to a bunch of different people just about moving forward in their walk with the Lord. And Roscoe, I want you to begin talking about, because you have such faith. When I think of Roscoe Lilly, I think of faith. One of the things you told me one time is you said, hey, if God can do it here, why can't he do it in Albany, New York?
Amen.
Tell me why you decided. I want to hear this. I want to know the story of Starpoint from the beginning, because I think it would so encourage so many of our listeners who want to live by faith, want to do something great for God, and they're just looking for a little encouragement, maybe a story of inspiration. And I don't know of a better one. I really don't. That is like HD than this story right here. So tell the story of Starpoint Church.
What you're really saying is, I don't think I've ever heard a worse story in my
it's
life.
Unbelievable. I love it.
Failure.
Every time I hear it, tell it.
Oh, man. Well, my wife and I, we met in college. I'm from North Carolina, grew up in Greensboro. She's from New York. We met at Liberty University, and we just both felt like God wanted us to be involved in church planting in some way. And I spent the summer in New York working with her father as a locker business. And I just became impressed, or just this burden for this area. Her family was driving 20 minutes to go to a church, not because they passed any other church. There just wasn't another church to go to. It was a church of about 60 people. The pastor had invested 28 years of his life there, and one of the fruit that he had was my wife, that came to know Christ. And she was just like,
which, by the way, Mariana Lilly, she's unbelievable.
Amazing.
Dynamic duo for Jesus right here.
Outpunting my coverage, for sure.
You did.
And so we, 24, young and dumb, we moved to New York, the old school, 2003. There's not a lot of church planting literature out there.
Yeah, this is before the church planting was cool. This is before, it was the thing to do. So 2003, it's in
There's
Albany.
a couple of books, but not many. I think there's like 2 or 3 books. We read those, and we parachute into to Albany there to start the church. And
which at the time, I'm going to fill in some blanks here.
Thank you.
Barna had labeled it the second least Bible-minded city in the country. So this isn't the Bible Belt where you parachute in to plant this church.
That's true. That's right. Vegas, I think, was number 6. Like, Sin City knows more about the Bible
than where you planted a church.
Albany does. Yeah,
amazing.
So, this is the capital of New York. Our first Sunday, no one comes to it. Just our family's there. So then we was like, well, we just really need to pray.
So did you led worship, you prayed, you preached? Mariana said amen.
Empty seats, wow. So we have our second service, we're praying hard in anticipation of this, and same kind of thing.
And you're a hard worker. It's not like you weren't beating the street. It's not like you weren't getting the word out, but nobody shows up. I'm just underscoring this for those listening. For 2 weeks in a row.
That's true. Yeah, that's 2 weeks in a row. And, we wanted to invest our life in someplace hard, but we didn't really understand what hard meant, And we had a professor challenge us. He's like, man, if you're going to start a church, go more than 250 miles from Lynchburg, and that led us to into the Northeast there. So then we had our third service, and, if we preach Jesus, and lift him high, all men will be drawn unto him. So I had my best Jesus message ready, and of course no one shows up, so then it was our fourth service. So we fast that week. We were like, because
how old are you at this time?
I'm
Roscoe?
24.
So you're 24 years old at this time. Okay.
Yeah. So we spent that week fasting, and we're like, we need a spiritual breakthrough. And again, no one shows up for our fourth service. So we just punt, and we're like, all right, this is obviously is not working, right? And so sometimes when you find that failure, the question you can ask yourself is the dream wrong? Did I mishear God? Or is it just the fact that the plan's wrong? And so sometimes it's not the dream's wrong. It's just that the plan that we have is wrong. So I don't know what to do. Here we are in New York, nothing's working. All right, we got to try something different. So I start reading through the Gospels. And get to Matthew 20, verse 26, where Jesus said, I didn't come to be served, but to serve and to give my life as a ransom. And I just felt like the Holy Spirit said, is that why you moved to Albany? Did you move to Albany to serve these people, or did you move here with the hopes of becoming some kind of celebrity, like the new church planting person? Did you move here to be the next Jarrett Stevens? So we just start serving our community, and my wife and I we start cleaning the restrooms in our town.
It's my favorite part of the story. And you start going into gas stations, restaurants, so anybody will have you to clean toilets.
Yeah, we're like, hey, we're from Starpoint Church, which doesn't technically exist right now. We're doing a community service project, and we're wondering if we could freshen up your restrooms for free. And the looks that we got were just so crazy. They're like, our employee who gets paid, minimum wage, that's the last thing on their to-do list is to clean a restroom. And you want to do it for free. Like, there's some other ulterior motive here. Is it because you're trying to case the joint to come back later on and steal something or break in? And it just really kicked the door open to have so many great spiritual conversations. And so we brought in some other people who felt really bad for us. Some mission teams from Texas came and helped us serve our community. And that was a foundational moment for our church. It's just that we have really been based on that idea that, especially in the Northeast, that it's not just about talking about God's love, but it's about showing it, and not just sharing God's word in a proclamation, but also demonstrating it. And our scripture is just so rich with all of that imagery. We think about Jesus saying, let your light shine before men that they may see your good deeds. Ephesians 2:8-10, talks about that we're created in Christ Jesus to do good deeds that He's prepared in advance. 1 Timothy 6 talks. Paul's telling Timothy, to tell them to be rich in good deeds. Hebrews talks about chapter 10 about consider how you can spur one another on towards love and good deeds. And those good deeds, of course, are not just serving in Vacation Bible School and serving inside, but how do we begin serving outside of our church, and what does that begin to look like? And so, as we started, fast forward to September of that year, 2003, we hold our first service. And I remember my wife and I, we were renting this banquet hall, and we were standing outside, like praying, someone please pull in, and they pull in and then they pull back out, and I'm just like, oh, this is going to be another. I had a tear. I had tears in my eyes. And I looked at my wife and I'm like, if no one comes, this is it. I can't do it again, you know. And she looked at me, she's a woman of such great faith, you know. We were praying that week before for money for a sound system, you know. We didn't have the money, and it was going to be $3,900. So you can imagine what kind of sound system that was for $3,900. Well, that was going to be our first sound system. And another friend in Atlanta had said, "Man, what do you need before you have your first service?" And we said, "Well, we need a sound system." And he said, "Well, how much do you think it's going to cost?" We said $3,900, and he tried not to laugh. And he said, "Well, you pray about it. I'll pray about it. We'll see what happens." And he called me at the end of the week, and he said, "Well, we just got a new business pastor here and over our administration." And he said he found a check that someone had given several years ago for missions somewhere in North America for $3,900.
That's amazing.
And so we got our sound system. My wife said, "Listen, God did not give that money 5 years ago for some church for missions for us, for no one to show up today." And so then the car pulled in, and 2 people got out, and they came inside. And so we had a total of 6 people from our community show up to that first service. I mean, it's like 600% growth, man. I mean, we're on our way.
Write your book, Roscoe. Write the book.
The mountains are calling. So we are. But then it's like, okay, how do we not die on the vine, right? It's like we start that Christmas of that year. We had 35 people, you know, and then it's like, you know, Easter. We had 75 people, you know, and then it's like, you know, each, you know, every growth barrier, 125, 200, 500, 750, you know, each one of those. So fast forward to this year, as we get ready to celebrate our 20th anniversary, we had 1638 at Easter this year. Man. We're going to baptize. We've baptized 93 since January of this year. So we'll cross 100 in October when we have our next baptism. God has just been so faithful, but man, it has been a grind, you know. And I had a pastor told me, he's like, "Listen, just keep your hands to the plow, you know, don't look back," what Jesus said. And you've got to grind it out. You have to look at your life in decades and not just in, you know, in years.
Yeah, I think really Eugene Peterson said it like, well, the long obedience in the same direction. And I love your story, because there are some people listening to this who, you know, think that it's an overnight success, and it's just not. Like, life is not like that. And you have labored and, just planted and sown, and you're reaping a harvest. But it's been, you know, don't lose sight, 20 years. 20 years of a long obedience in the same direction. It's beautiful.
God has been so faithful, and you've been a faithful friend too. I mean, I really hope people get that too. That you've been a faithful partner in that, and for others who may be planting churches, you know, now who are listening to this, you know, people promise you the world, you know. And you told me, you said, "Roscoe, you and I are going to be friends for a long time, and we're going to be doing a lot of ministry together." And you have been so faithful in all of that. And so
I appreciate you saying that. Yeah, I appreciate you saying that. I really believe that the kingdom of God advances on relationships. It just does. And we can do more together than we can apart. And we're all in the same game, pulling on the same end of the rope. And so that's why I take such joy in your story, because I feel like I've been a part of it, you know, not in a big part, but just through encouragement, through talking to you through the years, praying with you, visiting with you. Like, I get so happy hearing these stories, and it's just amazing. And Roscoe, what I love about you is, I follow you on social media, and you got a blog that you put out, and I think you are just one of the best leaders of people that I've ever been around, and the things that you write. And I want you to talk about, you know, there's this old saying, readers are leaders, right? I say that to my kids all the time. Readers are leaders. Get off your iPad. Readers are leaders. And you have taken that to the next level. Like, I was told one time that you'll be the same person in 10 years outside of the places you go, the people that you meet, and the books that you read.
That's good advice.
So like, if you want to be a different person in 10 years, it's going to be the places you go, the people you meet, and the books you read. And you are the most avid reader I've ever been around. Every year for my birthday, I look for it in the mail, Roscoe. I get Roscoe's book of the year, you know, the one that's just meant the most to you. You read a book a week. And so tell me about your veracity for reading. How did that start? Because I know people listen to this podcast, they're listening to this podcast because they don't want to read. You know? Right. But you get so much out of it. So just talk about, from a leadership standpoint, and you moving forward and just your relationship with the Lord from a professional standpoint, personal standpoint, what reading's done for you, how you got that, how that bug bit you, and just tell that story.
Yeah. Well, just so everybody else knows that's listening, I just got to visit your personal library. And so Jarrett's being very humble about his reading ability. I mean, I was pretty envious of all of this.
But I ain't reading a book a week, I promise
it's not a nook that you have. I mean, it's a literal library, and it's very, very impressive. And when I first felt called to the ministry, I recognized that every great pastor that I enjoyed listening to read, and they frequently talked about the books that they were reading, the things that they were learning, and I hated reading. I mean, I hated it. And so I just prayed. I said, God, if you really want me to be a pastor, you've got to give me a desire to read. I was like, there's nothing inside of me that wants to read or has a desire to read. And so that was my prayer in college, my senior year. And because I kind of fluffed it through, through school, I just turned it in, And so, but as a senior, I was like, I got to get really serious about this. I'm out right in the real world. And I'm like, man, I just don't have a desire to read. So I was like, God, if this is really your calling on my life, give it to me. And so I started reading, and I just picked up a book and said, all right, God, let's see if you can do it. And so then I was like, that was awesome. And I just picked up another book, just kept reading, and just never stopped.
You're like Forrest Gump reading. Gump ran, Lilly reads.
Yeah, that's hilarious. And I think, as far as gifts go, I think that a book represents so much of your life and time, and a busy person like yourself to maybe shave some time off of your life to say, hey, here's a way to save some time for you, that this book has been very meaningful to me, that I hope it blesses you as well. So
is there any particular book, and let's just say in the last year or 2 years, that you've read, or to our listeners who are sitting here going, okay, where would I even start? What would you give us 2 or 3 of your best?
Well, I think The Mountains Are Calling by Jarrett Stevens.
Nice, yeah. That one read if you're tired and having trouble sleeping. That's why you should read that one.
Those are great ones. This year I keep a list of all the books that I read for the year, which has been very helpful. And of course, then go to my blog and see the ones I put.
What's the site on that?
RoscoeLilly.com.
All right, there you go. RoscoeLilly.com.
Yeah. How my thing is, I just write down the title of all the books I've read. So it just kind of gives me a little keep track of it. The ones that are good, I bold them. And then those that I think will be qualifying for top 10, I highlight those. Okay. And if one I'm not sure, I underline it and bold it. Okay. But this year, one of the books I read early on that I really, really loved was a book by John Dixon called Bullies and Saints. And just fantastic as he goes through church history, talking about things that maybe didn't happen the way that you thought they happened. So maybe some things like the Dark Ages that are really a myth that he talks about. That was very interesting. And then the last 3 chapters were just awesome. I mean, just really encouraging. He addresses some of the challenges with the sexual abuse that we have, and of course in the Southern Baptist denomination, some of the challenges there, and he talks about that. And it's really amazing that he just, I think a lot of times we look at history and, it's complicated, that good people do bad things and bad people can even do good things, and really has some nice takeaways from each point of that. And so it's been a long time for me to review some of the church history stuff, and he does it in a really interesting way. And
Bullies and Saints by John Dixon.
I loved it so much, I read everything that he's written this year.
Okay.
And he has another one called The Best Kept Secret of Christian Mission. And he talks about there are lots of ways that we can help through evangelism. And of course, living in the Northeast, that's a big it's an important thing for us. Anywhere you look, almost anyone you talk to doesn't know Christ. So how can we begin sharing that? So he gives lots of interesting ways for us to be able to share our faith. So that was good. Great. And maybe one more bonus one. I read this at the beginning of the year called Gary Thomas has a book out. called When to Walk Away.
Yeah.
And it was such a powerful book, to think about that sometimes, especially as pastors, we love people. We don't want them to we don't want people to leave, and to try to, I think sometimes we can chase them, and seeing that Jesus let people walk away, specifically, with a rich young ruler, instead of saying, okay, just kidding, you don't have to sell all of it, just 50%, or hey, what about a tithe, so those are some good ones. I think people start with,
Okay. Now you're extremely creative. I think that probably comes obviously with your personality, but also in what you're reading. And one of the ways that I, as a pastor, follow you is through your sermon. Like, you have the most interesting sermon titles, the most interesting sermon series that I've ever seen. Like, most recently, I was preaching here at Champion Forest, and I even brought you up. I was like, my buddy Roscoe Lilly did a series called Pets, and it was on. Let me see if I get this right. It was on dangerous sins we domesticate.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're bringing scorpions on stage and snakes around you, and you just talk about these sins that we treat like little pet things, and then they they'll kill you.
They will.
And it's and you were doing it on the 7 dangerous sins. So it's not like you're doing this entertainment and not getting to the gospel. I mean, you're preaching the gospel, and you're dealing with, textual topics. And I mean, it's just unbelievable. So tell me, I've got preachers that are listening to this, and so we got ideas. Tell us how you come up with those ideas. And I want some examples, 3 or 4 of the most favorite creative series you've done.
I don't know about favorite or creative, and I think you're giving me a lot more credit than I have. But I really appreciate it. The thing about Jarrett, especially those who know you and those who are getting to know you through this podcast, is Jarrett has the gift of encouragement. I mean, I walk away from Jarrett always just walking on clouds, man, thinking I'm Superman and can do anything.
You can. You planted in Albany, New York. You can do. If you did that, you can do anything.
Oh man, I don't know. They're going to go look at my sermons and be like, well, I don't know what Jarrett's talking about.
No, you need to look up. No, you need to look up his sermons. So tell us about your series. How do you get creative like that? Think about that.
Well, so we try to keep a whole list of things that we're, by reading, that I'm trying to read things for next year. So we try to plan out a preaching calendar throughout a year. I have an Excel spreadsheet, and we put down the series for each year that we're working on. And some of them we don't have titles yet, but we know we want to talk about them. So
and when you're looking at that calendar, Roscoe, is it? I know here we always want to be balanced. Kind of have that saying, "Blessed are the balanced." So making sure Old Testament, New Testament, making sure topical versus expository, textual, going through books. Theology. Is that kind of what you're looking at? Theology. Okay.
So we did the Armor of God this summer, and I'm telling you, it was one of the best series that we've done in a long time. And you think about how often people talk about, the armor of God, and for people for us to go through that line by line in Ephesians 6, and we had a whole Roman soldier thing up on stage with all the armor. You can get all the armor off of Amazon. I think it's like $500. There's a little bit of an investment there, but people really resonated with that. I mean, even more than the Pets series. I mean, the Pets is kind of a fun, attractional series, and people can bring their friends. You can have pets in the lobby that they can touch and play with, and exotic stuff. But as we're headed into this fall, there's certain things that you're trying to move people to as steps in the church. And right now, triggered is a word that people use a lot. Oh, this triggers me, and it's always used in a negative way. Yeah. And so we're like, well, how can we turn this into a positive thing to talk about being triggered towards things of godliness that move us towards Christ? So one about evangelism, so when you hear someone say a certain phrase or word, that should trigger you to invite them to church. So what are these things that, hey, I instead of just like, oh, I'm sorry you feel that way, how to trigger them? When being triggered towards generosity, every time you get paid, it should trigger you to tithe, to give back to what God's doing. And then next year, as we're getting ready for, because we live in a place, like you said, least Bible minded, so how to help people understand the Bible. So going into Easter next year, you see this on every, TikTok, video, Instagram reel. It's like POV, point of view. So we're going to go through the point of view of the Gospels. What's Matthew's point of view? What's Mark's, what's the point of view he's trying to share? John's point of view, and just really helping them with that. So, but having time to look towards the future really gives you the ability to be more creative, and so personality is certainly a part of that.
Yeah.
And we tend to lean probably a little bit more topical than we do going through books. But even when you go through books, you can still do it about. You can come up with some clever branding around that, but all the letters that Paul wrote were addressing specific things in a church, in a church context. And I think that topical preaching kind of helps us do that, to address things that we know are happening in our local context, our local church, that need to be addressed through that. Not trying to say one way is better than the other. But.
No, I've ripped off your creativity so often, man. Like I think you got your church one day for Father's Day trucker hats, and I was like, we're doing that. And so Jimmy Forrest did trucker hats for Father's Day. We haven't done the tricycle race with dads after church, but we're going to. But again, just so creative, Roscoe, and I love your ministry, and really want to encourage those of you listening. If you want to be encouraged, if you want to grow, if you want to move forward in your walk with the Lord, Roscoe's a guy that you need to be following and listening to, and just a great voice. And again, I think where you sharpen me the most is, as you said, you minister in such an unchurched context, and you're always thinking about people who don't have a relationship with Christ. And that's how we need to be thinking, and how we need to be gearing our messages and making sure that we're speaking a language that people outside of the faith can understand. So tell us, just as we bring this to a close, man, tell us some things that you're praying through. How can we be praying for the Roscoe Lilly family and for Starpoint Church?
Thanks, Jarrett. Well, we have noticed that we have a large Brazilian population coming to our church.
Okay.
And it's not something that we have tried or sought after. And I remember there was a Bible study when I was in high school that was really popular in the late 90s called Experiencing God, right? And it was about, where is God working, and join him in that. And so we've been trying to reach out with some of our partners in the city to say, hey, what's going on? How do we even start a Brazilian church? What does that look like? And so last month, some Brazilian church planners came up, and he said, man, I've been doing a church for 5 years in the city, and we have 50 people coming who are Brazilian. He's like, you have that many here right now, and you're not even trying. Amazing. And he said, so let's do something to continue to reach that Portuguese-speaking community here in Albany. And if you would have asked me, I would have never even known that community was there, but that it's coming. So as we pray and look towards the future, we have every one of our services, we give them a listening device and so someone in another room is translating for them live so they can hear that. But being at Champion Forest and seeing how you take it so seriously, as you have the Hispanic congregation that's mixed and integrated and valued and championed here at Champion Forest, is an inspiration to us to say how can we do that as well. So thank you for leading the way in that, Jarrett.
Yeah, well, that's something we'll definitely be praying for. And Roscoe, again, thanks for just taking time today to have this conversation.
Pleasure. And
so grateful for who you are and how God is using you. And again, to all of those listening, RoscoeLilly.com. So RoscoeLilly.com, you want to go there and just follow him. Thanks for coming in, Roscoe.
Enjoy. Thanks, Jarrett.